Hello, everyone.
Oh, I don't think they're all in action. Okay, there we go.
Oh, okay, there they are. Yeah,
Hmm.
that extra step.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We'll be getting
Hi.
started in just a moment.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh, Miss Zets, when you upload the PowerPoint, don't
Mm,
forget to click the sound.
Share sound. Okay.
Sound. Yep.
Well, is it the same? Okay, hold on. Okay, yeah. Good.
Welcome, everyone. We'll be getting started in another couple of minutes, so just giving everybody a chance to join.
Okay, let me make sure that you see that okay. Okay. Do you see that okay, Miss Gratian?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I don't know how the poll's gonna look, but that'll work. We'll see. Okay.
It looked like it was going to show up correctly.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, I'm gonna take it down just for a moment while I guess I'll pop it back up here in just a second. Okay, I think it's time that we go ahead and get started. All right, so welcome everybody to our PharmD interview workshop. Thank you for attending today. We hope that we have a lot of good information to share with you today so that you can prepare for your PharmD interview, whether you are, going to be applying the cycle or an upcoming cycle. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Erica Zetz. I'm the PharmD admissions recruiter and advisor with the Taneja College of Pharmacy. So welcome everyone, and I'll have Miss Cratian introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I am Gwen Cratian, and I'm the Director of Admissions here within the Taneja College of Pharmacy. We are excited to have you with us today.
So yeah, so we are just a little heads up about a couple of things today. This is in webinar format, so you will notice that your cameras and your mics are disabled, and so that is for the purpose of the webinar. However, feel free to use the chat. You saw Ms. Cratian, some of you may have seen Ms. Cratian drop a welcome message there. I'm going to drop another message in the chat as well so that you can see that. So feel free to ask questions, knowing that we are going to cover a lot of information throughout. We'll try to cover as much as we can. If there's a question that is outside of something we're going to cover within the PowerPoint, then we'll definitely be happy to answer within the chat. If you don't see the chat, there's also a Q&A box or like bubble as well. Sometimes people cannot see the Q&A and sometimes or the chat, and sometimes they have the Q&A. It's one or the other. So feel free, if you don't have the chat bubble, to use the Q&A one. And lastly, we are recording the session. So if I will, or after today, I will go ahead and follow up, and I'll send this recording to you as well, so you can take a look at what, if you need to review something that we covered, you'll be able to look at that again as well. So just know that that's coming as well. So we are recording, but as long as you stay, you're able to ask the questions, and we'll be happy to address all of that with you today. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this PowerPoint up so we can um, talk interviews. So just bear with me right now as I get that loaded up. All right. Okay, so let's see. Let me make sure I have everything I'm trying to do here. Okay, great. All right. So today, myself and Miss Cratian will be presenting different parts of the presentation. And when whoever's not speaking will be manning the chat box. So just know that. So the first question, just to kind of get you all started and to just get a feel for who is in the room today. Hopefully you can see this poll okay. So if you will, take a look at the question here so you can just join poll everywhere to participate. Let me make sure that you are seeing the instructions. So you all should be able to see the
Oh,
instructions, right, Miss
so
Cratian?
the instructions aren't showing just yet. It's showing the screen that says start the presentation to see live content. That's not
Well,
showing
that's
the,
interesting.
the instruction screen. We could always pivot to the chat if we need to.
So that's still what it's showing. Wait, did I
Mm.
skip a? That should be okay. Well, maybe I need to go. Is that it?
Oh, yes, that. Oh,
Okay.
well, no, it's just showing the
Still.
percentages.
Oh,
It still doesn't show the
let's do this.
instructions. Oh,
Now, do we have instructions?
no, maybe
No.
hit back
Whoops.
and
Okay.
okay, yeah, and no, it's just showing like the percentage if they were to be
Hmm.
able to access it. I wonder, or but you can
Okay.
see the
Well,
instructions.
I can see them, yes. I don't
Do
know.
you, I could.
Okay, well,
Okay,
that's
I was gonna say,
fine.
okay.
We will pivot. So the question is, everyone, when do you want to start pharmacy school? Fall 2027 or fall 2026, fall 2027, or fall 2028 or later? Actually, I'm going to go to the previous slide so you can see all the options there. Oh no, it's the same thing. So if you will just drop instead in the chat your answer. Do you want to start, are you planning to start pharmacy school in fall 2026? Ooh, lots of fall of 2026. Okay, fantastic. Awesome. Love it. That's great. Awesome. Okay, so it looks like generally everyone, many people are applying this cycle, and then there's one or two that are applying in a future cycle. So anyone who's applying in a future cycle, just know that this probably will be pretty relevant at the time that you may have an interview in the future. But we do this every year, so definitely come back in the future cycles just in case anything's changed. But regarding interviews, some of this stuff sort of goes on with time. So definitely will apply. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just, I'm going to go over the agenda with you. So the things that we're going to cover today in this session, we're going to talk about the purpose of the interview. Why do we bring students for an interview? Why is it important for the admissions committee to interview our students? We will talk about professionalism in regards to interviewing and what that looks like. And then we'll go over the types of interviews, not only that we do, but that you can kind of expect when applying for pharmacy programs. And then also the interview process specific to us. We'll talk about the types of questions that you can expect to maybe answer in an interview setting, and ways to sort of prepare for that. And then we will do a little bit of practice towards the end just to kind of give you to kind of start getting your mind thinking through an example question for your future interview. So the purpose of the interview, why are interviews necessary? Of course, you're going to be going through quite the application process when it comes to PharmD. I'm sure many of you have already submitted applications or are working on submitting your applications. And so it's really important that once you have submitted that application, that the next step is that interview. So just remember that with the application, the first kind of glimpse of the admissions committee into who you are is that personal statement. But, that can be, that can look very lovely, but at the end of the day, the admissions committee may still not have the full picture of who you are. And so this is a really great way for them to be able to assess a few different things. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But first of all, one of the things is our accreditation. So all colleges of pharmacy, well, not all colleges, but most colleges of pharmacy are accredited by a higher professional education organization. And so our accrediting body, the ACPE, requires that we are interviewing applicants who are being considered for our program. So we do have to make sure that we're meeting our accreditations standards. It's not only an option, it's not only for us to be able to assess you, but it's for you to assess us as a program as well and determine if this is the place for you. So this is an opportunity for you to make connections, to chat with our faculty, and then, later on, even our current students, and be able to determine, is this where you want to be? Maybe in theory it sounds great and everything you've learned about it sounds great, but once you start interacting and really learning more, is this the program for you? And then, of course, do we also want to make sure that this is the program for you? So we will assess in that interview, not we, because I'm not interviewing you, but the admissions committee or the faculty who interview you are going to determine, if they feel like this is a great place for you to be. And that's going to be based on those conversations, partly based on those conversations. So those interviews are going to assess your non-cognitive skills. So essentially, like understanding, how you address, situations in the kind of worldly situations and circumstances in the healthcare world as a professional, or how you maybe have responded in certain such situations. It's looking at sort of your integrity and things like that. So, in your interview, they're going to really, consider your communication skills, your interpersonal skills, which is really important for a pharmacist, emotional maturity, and, so these are the type of this is the type of assessment that a faculty member is going to have on you based on these questions that you're going to get, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Empathy and discipline. So again, these are very interpersonal skills and not so much these cognitive, like we know that you're already a bright student. That's all covered in your application. We know that you probably can do really well in coursework and things like that. We've already assessed that at that point. Now it's time for them to assess you just as a human being, as a future professional, and as a healthcare, specifically as a healthcare professional. So speaking of professionalism, first impressions matter. So, we always like to say that the interview actually begins before the actual interview day. So you definitely want to be cognizant of this as you are preparing after you've submitted that application and you're preparing to hopefully get that interview. As you're communicating with whether it's the admissions professionals, the faculty, anything that's going to require communication prior to that and leading up to that interview, that's going to be the first impression. So that might be email or phone communication. This is one that I'm actually dealing with a lot when it comes to future applicants. Being an advisor for the program is I do a lot of communication through email and phone, also virtually. And so, you know, emails and phone conversations do leave a lasting impression. And it's very important that, even though for myself as an admissions professional, that I'm not a faculty member who's going to be interviewing you, or I might not be on the admissions committee. But it's still important that you are communicating with the admissions professionals in still that professional manner. And so, because that, like I said, that sticks. So emails, just being courteous in your emails, taking time to craft a thoughtfully crafted email, making sure that you're doing research before you send an email with lots of questions. We can generally tell when you haven't done your due diligence before sending an email, and we consider that unprofessional when you reach out to us and you expect us to handhold essentially through the process. So make sure that you're doing your due diligence, and that when you send an email, it doesn't feel urgent, it doesn't feel pushy, and that you're spending time and on crafting that email. The same with phone communication. So if you want to reach out to anybody, if you're reaching out in advance regarding your interview or anything like that, we understand that it's a very anxious time when you're in the interview process, but you have to remember that the people on the other line have a lot going on as well. So time management, thinking ahead of time and reaching out will help with maybe reducing some of that urgency. So if you reach out, say you do call us, and I'll just tell you that email is usually the better way to go, but phone, just because we're always back and forth. I'm away from my desk many times, so again, phone communication, if you do not hear back, just calling multiple times over and over again is not necessarily the professional thing to do. Leaving a message, completely fine. You can definitely leave a message, again, thoughtfully, leaving that message and being clear in your message. First impressions will also be, what you're wearing. So we'll talk a little bit about attire and what that looks like in the interview, and know that it matters. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that matters and some examples of how that's come up. And then verbal and nonverbal. That's, a big one. It's sometimes hard to gauge when you are in a virtual setting, and these things, the attire and the verbal and nonverbal communication, definitely are something that you have to think about even when you're in a virtual setting, because although there is a screen between you and the person that you're talking to, we have two eyes we can still see, and those verbal and nonverbal cues are very important to consider. All right, so email etiquette. So, we've I sort of went into the email etiquette thing, but here's some, I guess, a little bit more information on preparing to send emails. So, again, uh, we talked about doing kind of your due diligence and trying to find answers on your own before sending an email with 30 questions. We really put a lot of information out on our website. It's in PharmCast. We give a lot of detail in emails leading up to the interview process if you've been offered an interview. So make sure you're doing, reading through those before you send your emails. And again, it shows resourcefulness, and that's a good thing for you. If you are offered an interview, it's really important that you respond promptly to that. So as soon as you know that you're able to attend that interview, go ahead and go in there and accept, or respond to the interview invite. So whether, if you need to reschedule or anything like that, just go ahead and get that ball rolling. Again, sending multiple emails or making multiple phone calls can be a little bit frustrating for us on the other end, because we just can't always get to you right then. And that feeling of urgency and pushiness, doesn't really make a good rapport for, your admission staff and the students. So just being aware of that, give us a little bit of time. If we don't reply to an email, within 2 days, like, go ahead and you can always send a follow-up, a kind follow-up, and the same thing with a phone call as well. knowing that the phone calls are sometimes, again, it's a hit or miss with phone calls, but we definitely try to do our best to get to all our calls and emails. We do get a lot of emails and phone calls, especially at the high application times. Um, Using a professional email address. Just consider what are in, your email alias. Just make sure that it's something that is just clear, easy to use. We do use those before you're admitted. Up until you get a USF email address, we're going to become pretty familiar with your email address. So, I would just try to do something that's kind of cleaned up, professional, something, an email address that that you're going to be able to find important emails in. So, if you get a lot of junk email to an email address, maybe create another one that's for professional use only. So consider doing that. And any emails that you could be getting, considering that they might end up in your junk box. So if you're expecting an email from us, or you're in the process of applying to programs, and you have been in communication, make sure that you're regularly checking your spam email, because we do know that emails that we send through Farmcast or through the web admit system sometimes do get caught up in spam. So just make sure that you check those, because they can get lost in there. So just be aware of that. Using, you know, considering who it is that you are emailing. So as much as I would love to say that I am, Dr. Zetz, that's my father-in-law. I am not. So, feel free, I'm just Mrs. Zetz. But not everyone is doctor, or, again, you're also considering pronouns and things like that. And so just be aware of that when you're sending emails as well. And then, the spelling of names as well. And then just being professional, proofreading your messages. Um, I know we're in a time of AI, and it's easy to have AI craft your emails. Sometimes that can be obvious. Sometimes maybe it just helps you clean things up. That's kind of up to you, honestly. I hope that you can use your own work when it comes to crafting an email. But what's important to us on this end is that it's clear and concise, and we're able to respond to, a professionally written email. Um, you know, Consider doing a signature line. Has all your information, contact info if we need to get back in touch with you. Makes it easy for you to already have that in there, and looks very clean and professional. And then considering things like replying to all, or, confidentiality. So just, thinking about all of these things, as you are crafting emails and communication. All right, so phone etiquette. So, I've talked a little bit through this as well. So I'm not going to spend a lot more time on this. I think you all kind of get the point with, phone etiquette. Again, email is so much more efficient nowadays. So that's usually the easier way to get, but, it's fine to make a phone call. It's still considered professional. It's just fine. If you do have to leave a message, again, just being very clear and concise. Sometimes those calls come in very um, fuzzy, and you can't really hear, what someone is saying or pronounce their name, or, and it's hard for us, because then if I don't understand what you're saying in an email, or I don't hear your name clearly, it's very awkward for me to have to call back and say, yeah, somebody called me at this number. Like, I'd rather be able to address whoever it is that called me. So just make sure that you are clear about that. And then whatever it is, like, what is it that you are needing to ask, just to kind of give us a heads up. Like, when I call you back, I want to make sure that I'm prepared to answer your question. So just a little heads up of like what you might be asking, or why you're calling. Um, and then again, just being kind of courteous, and just being appreciative of the time of any staff member. And I'm not just talking about myself, obviously, but if you're reaching out to other programs and other admissions professionals, it's a busy time. So just just being aware that that's a courtesy for them to call you back, and be able to help you there. Okay, so attire. So whether it's in person or a virtual interview, your attire really does matter. And I will tell you that we just did interview training with our faculty, and we had faculty a faculty member who said, they've noticed in previous interviews that some students, applicants were attending their virtual interview and not professionally dressed. As a pharmacist and as a student, a PharmD student, you will be expected to dress professionally on a daily basis. So just go ahead and get comfortable with that idea. And your interview is kind of going to be the height of like your being professional. So again, although you might be behind a screen, consider how you are dressing for your interview. So I have two examples here, business casual versus business professional. I'll tell you that both are okay. Business professional is the most appropriate for your interview. And so you'll see kind of the difference in sort of options there on like what you can wear. So your business casual is going to be more of that polo, slacks, a dress blouse. Whereas business professional, you're kind of going to add that blazer or that suit jacket. You might wear a full suit, dress shoes. Obviously, if you are interviewing virtually, maybe your shoes don't matter, but certainly from your ankles up, I would plan to dress, professionally. Like I said, both are okay, but the business professional is really going to be the most appropriate for your interview day. So here are some examples of what looks professional. Um, and I know that like there's always like sort of the joke, like, you have like business on the top and you're like in your pajama pants on the bottom. I actually urge against that. As wonderful as that may seem, and maybe on a day-to-day basis, if you work remotely, that's okay. But for your interview, how you dress is really going to help your confidence in the interview. So keep that in mind, that if you feel professional head to toe, then you may come off even more confident in your interview. So certainly just try that day to, do the whole thing, even if it's virtual. And I don't remember what else I was going to say, but again, you can just see some examples there of what looks professional versus not. And if you have in-person interviews, obviously, then, you're definitely wanting to make sure that you nail all of these things. So things that are not appropriate, and we have applicants, and it goes notice when I tell you that, our faculty will make a note in your interview notes or your review. They will notice if you are not dressed professionally. So hoodies, t-shirts, maybe you're not like your hair's not combed nicely, or, things like that. You just definitely want to make sure that, you're groomed, you look prepared for like you're applying for a job. Because this is in fact professional school. So that is how you should plan to dress. All right. Okay, so then communication. So again, we're talking about professionalism. So communication during the interview, and again, talking about that verbal versus nonverbal communication and why that's important. And so verbal. So again, in your interviews, you want to consider the volume of your voice, whether you're speaking clearly, avoiding filler words like and different words like that. And I know that's hard to do. I do it. I use filler words all the time, but just kind of just preparing. The more that you sort of prepare, start kind of like practicing, certain sentences and things that you're going to use or talk about, you are going to have to give an introduction. So maybe use that as a way to sort of practice how you're speaking to your interviewers. But those filler words, just try to work on getting rid of some of those. As I think just the human nature causes us to use those. Just do your best to kind of avoid it as much as possible and just speak very clearly and concisely. Positivity. Just being positive when you answer. You want to come into this interview with a very kind of positive mindset. speaking just very, just when you're answering questions, making sure that you can, tell a good story. Just feel comfortable to just be in sort of a pleasant space whenever you're meeting with your interviewer. So come with that smile, come positive. That's kind of the more nonverbal, but we'll talk about that. And just continue to just be positive with your responses. Having a question for the interviewer, and I always actually on the day of their interview, I remind interviewees to just always have a question sort of prepared and ready to ask faculty when you have, in the event that you have the opportunity to ask them questions. You can ask them, things about, what their specialty, or, why they like TCOP, or whatever it is. So just come prepared. We actually provide a list to students about questions they can ask faculty to help prepare. But if you have something that you think ultimately you'd like to know, just have it ready. It can get a little nerve wracking. You're in the middle of your answering interviews, and if at the end they say, well, do you have any questions for me? Just be prepared with that question that you may want to ask them. And then just be sure at the end of your interview to not just like end it awkwardly with a, just kind of like, and then it just gets silent, but, make sure you thank them, for the time. And, you can keep it very simple. Again, positive, and just recognizing that time they gave to the interview. Then nonverbal. So your greeting. So you're not going to be, so if you're going to interview in person, handshake is kind of became a weird thing after the COVID times. So now I think with handshaking, you're kind of feeling out the room. And if they reach a hand out to you and you feel comfortable with it, just giving them, a good solid handshake. I always say if you can't handshake, just kind of like a hot hello greeting with your hand, and nodding your head, just a very kind of warm, welcoming sort of greeting. Your physical appearance is part of those nonverbal, that nonverbal communication. How you show up communicates something. It communicates whether you want to be there, communicates how much you cared about being there, it communicates how much you prepared for being there. So just keeping that into consideration. And if taking that into consideration, and if you are interviewing in person, things like perfume also, will feed into that. So don't overdo the perfume. If you spritzed yourself once or twice, don't worry. You smell great. Don't go crazy. And really, unless I am the type of person that perfume actually adds confidence to me. Like, I feel like that helps me for my day. So I would choose to use it, but I'm going to do like one spray on like an interview day and leave it at that. Like, just don't go, don't go crazy. Your responses, are going to be using eye contact as well. So when you're responding, making sure that you're connecting with that interviewer, even on a virtual interview, which I know is hard to do because it's like, where's the camera? Where's the screen? And I like tend to want to watch myself on the screen. So if you like to see yourself on the screen, put your camera right in front of yourself on the screen so that you can, see what you're doing. Whatever it is that makes it look like at least that you are engaging directly with that person who's interviewing you. But you definitely want to be looking into that camera. And then your facial expressions, just being aware of that. Maybe take a little video of yourself prior to, and kind of get a feel for those like verbal cues and what you're doing with your eyes and your face and your expressions, just to kind of prepare for, giving a strong nonverbal or giving strong nonverbal communication. And then if you are in an in-person interview, personal space, just making sure that usually it's already set up in a way that you have a reasonable amount of like distance between you. But if for any reason it was not prepared, just making sure that you're not, getting into the bubble, as I like to call it. And then confidence, just, again, do what it takes for you to feel confident for that day to prepare. If you need to like work out, get those endorphins going, whatever it is before your interview. But just come in there and, being positive, having a smile, and being ready for the interview is definitely going to communicate confidence without like verbally saying it. So just again, and when I say confidence, we do have there, don't exaggerate the truth. So just be honest, just be you, and be proud to be you. And that will definitely bring on that nonverbal confidence. All right. So another question that doesn't work on Poll Everywhere. What are you most confident about in the interview process? So you can go ahead and drop that in the meeting chat like you all did earlier. Tell us what you are most confident about in the interview process. And so you'll want to go ahead and use, I'm not seeing any answers. I don't know if you guys hear, but drop your answers here. Unless I'm just not seeing. There we go. Yep. It's definitely not working. Okay. All right. So I see personality. I love that. Dressing nicely. Good. That's great. I'm sure you have impeccable taste. Let's see. Greetings, telling your story in person. I love that. Personality again, great. Dressing and be professional, positivity and personality and getting to know the interviewer. The ones who are saying my personality and positivity, I'm already feeling that through just your messages, so it works. Explaining yourself, talking about your strengths and weaknesses, etc. Okay, great. Really great responses. Thank you for sharing those. And so that's really good. Yeah, keep those close. Go into the interview with having that really positive outlook for sure. Okay, so on the other hand, what are you least confident about in the interview process? Drop your answers in the chat. What are you least confident about within the interview process? Personality, expressing what they want you want to be that you want to be there via your body language. Yeah, definitely understandable. That is a little bit harder. The nonverbal cues are certainly harder, especially I think with you all. I'm sure a lot of you have done a lot of virtual learning and things like that, and it's less and less expected for you to even have your cameras on at that. So I know that that is something that you have to kind of adjust to and start kind of working on, because it's not just like sitting in class, but it's more, a more interactive environment. So I definitely get that. Nerves, coming off as nervous with filler words and body cues, filler words. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Again, really great responses again. And that's something you just continue to work on. And again, if you just put your best foot forward, I'm sure you all will do fantastic. All right. So at this point, I am going to shift it over to Miss Cratian, who is going to go over types of interviews and talk to you a little bit about the interview day format and some interview day tips.
All right. Thank you, Miss Zet. And I'm not sure. Let's see. Oh, okay. I think it's takes it a little bit. So real quick, one of the best pieces of advice that I can give you all in terms of, not knowing what to do with your body or just body language and things like that, and just being comfortable with the interview is to do practice interviews, even if you're practicing with yourself, but also try to see if it's your career services office will offer some type of mock interviews. Take advantage of if there's a club that's putting on mock interviews, anytime you see something like that offered. But also get with each other. If you have classmates, they're going to be doing interviews. Say, hey, look, can we do some mock interviews with each other? I just want to see how I'm coming across. How are you perceiving me as I'm doing this? Are you noticing that I'm saying, you know, talk with me a little bit about that. Help each other out when it comes to that. So that would be some good advice that I would give you in terms of that. Definitely do some mock interviewing if you can. Okay, let's see. Oh, I knew that was going to happen. It's a little slightly delayed, so I just have to be careful with my hitting of the next button. Okay. All right, so let's dive into some general talk about interview day formats and what you can kind of expect as you go into the interview season with pharmacy schools. So for this cycle, I do feel confident that most schools are going to be offering either an in-person or some type of virtual interview option. Uh, it's required that we have some type of interview, so just keep that in mind. Now, historically at USF, Taneja College of Pharmacy, we have offered both in person and virtually since the pandemic. But this year, we have a lot of different transitions that are going on with some of our processes. And so we are going to be moving to all virtual interviews this cycle. So we wanted to go ahead and inform you all of that. If you're applying this cycle, you probably saw a note about that when you went to look up information about our program, but that is something different that we are doing, and we want to make sure that all candidates have the same type of interview experience with us, some of them not having in person and then some being virtual. So we decided to make all of them virtual. That was the easiest thing to do because some students can't always physically get here for an in-person interview. So that is the route we are going with that. Now, with interview days, you can expect anywhere from a couple of hours for an interview day to a full long interview day when you're looking at the different colleges of pharmacy. For us, it used to historically be about a half a day of an interview day, but now we are moving more towards a 2 hour time block for an interview experience with us. So keep that in mind. And then you are typically, when you're interviewing at institutions, you're going to be interviewing with other candidates. So keep that in mind. Usually there's other candidates that you'll interact with, even if it's just for a brief period of time, especially if you're interviewing virtually, but you're typically going to see some other candidates interviewing on that interview day. And then you can expect a wide variety of different types of assessments, which we'll talk about those different types of assessments a little later, but you can expect a variety in terms of the types of interview formats when you're interviewing at the different programs. Here at the Taneja College of Pharmacy, we will have an oral interview only, so there will not be any type of additional assessments. There will just be the oral interview, and you will have MMIs or a traditional interview for your interview questions, and we'll get into that a little later. There could be at these interview days additional opportunities for you to meet with faculty, staff, current students, potential classmates, and tour the school, whether it's at that time or at a later date. So usually when you're interviewing at the different institutions, that's our opportunity to share with you as much as we can about our institution. So we want to have you interact with a variety of different individuals so that you can learn about our programs. So keep that in mind when you are going through the interview process. So, we as an institution are interviewing you, but this is also your opportunity to interview us and get to know us, take it all in, and figure out who we are as an institution and be able to ask questions. So definitely take advantage of all those different moments. Now, diving a little bit deeper into the virtual interview day tips and tricks, since, again, we will be doing all virtual interviews here at the Taneja College of Pharmacy. Again, as Mrs. Zetz already said, we encourage you from head to toe to be dressed professionally. You never know what could happen. You end up having to get up unexpectedly, and then next thing you know, you got on pajama bottoms. Nobody wants that. So just make sure that you are in the right mindset and you're dressing as though somebody is going to be in the room with you looking at you fully. And make sure that you're using your laptop or desktop. While these smartphones are very smart, you come out better using the laptop or the desktop when you're doing these interviews. Usually the programming works a whole lot better. Now, I do think it's appropriate to make sure that you have tested things not only on the laptop or desktop, but also on your cell phone. I think you should have your cell phone charged. You can have it away, but you want to make sure that you have some type of backup option. If something goes wrong with your computer, you're able to, that you have whatever app downloaded, whether it's Zoom or Teams on your phone, to be able to quickly pull that up if need be. You got to be able to think quickly. How can you continue this forward? This is your shot to interview with this particular school. So let me make sure I have a backup option and I'm showing that I'm prepared for anything that could possibly happen. I'm ready. So make sure that you're doing your testing. Make sure that you test your audio, everything ahead of time. And I understand, I've had it happen before where you do your testing and then the next thing you know, it's the day of and you're trying to get in and something's all wonky. Most of the schools understand you're nervous. We understand there's technology glitches, things happen, and they will be patient with you and work with you and try to help you navigate any challenges that you're having. But just make sure that you've done your due diligence ahead of time and make sure that even if you're interviewing virtually, that you're arriving early so that you have time to work out any kinks. We usually are in the room early in advance. That way we can go ahead and start letting candidates in, and that gives them a little bit of time to figure out, oh my goodness, my camera's not working for some reason. I'm not sure. Oh, there's a software update. Let me quickly do that. I could be on my phone in the meantime. We work with you through those things. Again, make sure that you know exactly which platform that particular school is using. All of the schools, when they invite you to an interview, they're going to reach out to you ahead of time. They're going to tell you all the information you need to know as far as what platform they're using so that you have plenty of time to get yourself familiarized with that platform. Now, those of you who are USF students already, you know that we're a Microsoft school, so we do utilize Microsoft Teams for our virtual interview. Make sure that you're in a quiet place, for your interview, and be mindful of your background, anything that could be distracting in the background. But it's also nice to be who you are. If you have something up in the background that represents where you're from, what school you go to, or something like that, that's fun. Sometimes that brings on conversation in the beginning when folks are doing introductions and things like that. You just really don't want a distracting background. And by that, I really mean you don't want to be somewhere where there are people walking behind you, even though it might be quiet. That's distracting. And it could also, put you in one of those situations where the interviewers think, well, is this person cheating because there are people that I can see behind them walking around? So just make sure that, you're the only one there in that space and you dedicate being somewhere intentionally where there's not going to be any room for any questioning of where you are or what you're doing in terms of integrity. And then make sure that you utilize resources. We are giving you this big resource with having this interview workshop, but there are also other resources, and we will share this with you in a follow-up email when we send the recording from today's session. But Farmcast has put together a really nice best practices for virtual interview day resource page as well. So definitely encourage you to check that out also. Okay. There we go. Now, different types of oral interviews. So there's a variety that you can expect. So we want to make sure that you have a feel for the different ones. So there's those traditional type of interviews that are just one-on-one, where it's you and the faculty member, and y'all are interviewing. That person is just interviewing you. And of course, with all these different interviews, you're going to find that there's pros and cons. Perceived pros and cons is what we like to say for all of them. There's no right or wrong way for a school to do an interview. They just do it based on their institution and their faculty, what they think is best for their school. So you just kind of have to be prepared for them all and take advantage of what each one has to offer you. And I think part of that is just knowing the different types of interviews. So with the one-on-one, perceived pros of that is that you're really getting to know that particular individual that you're interviewing with. So you're really getting to build a rapport with them, and it makes it easy to be able to ask that individual multiple questions, and then they're asking you multiple questions. But of course, perceived cons could be that you're only getting that one opinion of that particular interviewer in terms of that institution. And then, of course, interviewer bias if you're just interviewing one on one with that particular individual. And then there are other interview types where it might be two-on-one, where there's two faculty member to one student, might be a panel that's interviewing you, or it could be that you're in a group setting for the interview itself. So with that, of course, perceived pros could be that there's a variety of questions that you're getting from a variety of different individuals. You're getting multiple opinions of the institution at that point because you're getting to interact with a variety of different individuals. And then, of course, there's multiple points of assessment because each of those different individuals is likely evaluating you during that time. And then perceived cons would be that it can be more difficult to build a rapport because you are interacting at that point with multiple individuals. So you're only getting a little bit of time with each one of those individuals in your interaction and them potentially answering a question or not. Perhaps the question isn't as suited for them to be the one to respond to it. It can feel competitive in nature, especially if you're in this group setting for an interview. So that can be kind of intimidating. And it also can kind of have this ditto effect where somebody else says something that you feel like you would have said, but you didn't say it before they said it. So then you're kind of left with feeling like, oh, well, only thing I would say is, yeah, I agree, ditto. Yeah. So, that can be a little different. And then there's multiple mini interviews. So perceived pros with that would be that, again, you're getting to interview with a variety of different individuals. There's multiple points of assessment. So you have multiple individuals that are writing an evaluation on you. The questions do tend to be standardized in nature, and then it's less interviewer biases. And then perceived cons, you have limited time to build a rapport with those individuals, especially depending on how many multiple interviews you're doing. If you have 10 versus if you have 3, the amount of time that's broken up amongst each one of those different stations. And then of course, just it's a limited amount of time to talk with that interviewer. Sometimes you might not be allowed to ask them questions afterwards. They might have another time slot for that. So it really just kind of depends. They may just be there just to ask you that one question, you answer, and then on to the next thing, on to the next station. So that can be a little different. Okay. Now, this is kind of a trick because one, this is already answered. So this will be if y'all are paying attention to what I just said. But what type of oral interview format does USFTCOP use? So what do we use here? What kind of interview? And we're going to go into more detail on this after this. But if y'all will put it in the chat, like what do you think the answer is to this question? What interview type do we use? Any guesses? I love it. Lots of MMIs. Okay. So let's see. Let's hit the next slide. Oh no. Let's see. Let me hit it again. Okay, I'm in this little limbo where it's not moving. I don't know why. Huh. It didn't move for y'all, did it? Is it still on the poll slide? Is that it is?
It's still
Okay.
on the poll. Yeah, I think it's because I moved my cursor, and so it's doing that
Oh,
the
okay, the
weird
thing.
thing.
I was like, oh, and then my little
Here,
head for the
I can do it
cursor
for you.
just went away. It's like, okay. All right. Okay. So if you answered MMI, that is partially correct. Now, historically, at the Taneja College of Pharmacy, we have done MMIs. So since our existence, we have done MMIs, but we are going to be transitioning to more of a traditional interview format. So, if you interview with us this cycle, you will have an oral interview with us and you'll be asked some questions. It could be in a format of an MMI, or it could be that you're asked those questions in more of a traditional interview format. So, just be prepared for that. But we do like to break down to you the MMI because that is very different, the structure of how an MMI is done versus your typical traditional type of interview. Most individuals are a little bit more familiar with your traditional type of interview, and usually you've done, potentially some type of job interview, and it's going to be done in a traditional interview format. So just keep that in mind. With the interviews, again, like I said earlier, they will be conducted via Microsoft Teams. So we will send you, Mrs. Vetz actually is the one that does it, we'll send you calendar invites so that you know exactly where to go. So usually what we do is we have a general session room virtually. And so you'll start out there where she'll go over all the instructions, what you can expect for the day. And then from there, you will also be provided the individual links for your MMI stations if you're going to have MMI stations, or if you're going to be in an individual interview with faculty, more of a traditional interview, then you'll be given those stations and she would go over all of that with you and make sure that you're good on knowing, how to hop between stations and things like that. So just know that. And then one of the other things, we didn't put this on here. So our interview day, when if we invite a candidate to participate in an interview, when they interview with us for that interview day, well, really only they'll be with us for 2 hours virtually, and they will just be doing the actual interview where they're interacting with the faculty and answering questions. We will be offering monthly to those candidates who interview with us. We will be offering an actual, it'll be an exclusive information session for interviewees where they will have time to hear from our dean from academic affairs. They'll hear from our student affairs dean or either assistant director from that area. They'll hear from financial aid, and we'll also have a student panel, so they'll get to interact with our current students. But we wanted to make the interview day just about the interview because what we were finding is that it's a big chunk of time that we were taking away from applicants, and so we really wanted them to be able to get their interview done and then move on to having a session where they could do all of the extra components and be able to interact with a variety of different individuals. And then we will have time and invite those candidates that have interviewed with us, and especially those candidates who are offered admission to our program. They will be encouraged to come and have tours with us and see the facilities and do all of that. We will be available to do all of those things with those candidates. So just kind of keep that in mind. It'll be a little bit of a different process for us, but that is the direction that we're going for this cycle and going forward, since again, we're moving away from the more of the MMI type interviews. So with that, we will have individual questions that candidates will be asked in the different stations if they're interviewing in stations or versus they're actually interviewing in more of a traditional format with us. Miss Setz, I'll click that if that helps. And so just kind of keep that in mind. And really, the interview, it's to assess your non-cognitive skills. Obviously, the admissions committee, they're reviewing your application file and they're looking at your file holistically, all the different aspects of your file. So they're getting to see your academics. But this is the opportunity to see who you are as an individual, why you're interested in the field of pharmacy, what all you've been doing, and your interpersonal skills. So from there, if you are doing an MMI with us, we do allot 8 minutes per question, and we do give candidates 2 minutes to review the question beforehand and be able to take notes on that question. So they'll have some time to, process the question and take any notes that they have before they provide an answer to that particular question. We do have, mostly our faculty are the ones who are interviewing candidates from time to time. We may have an administrator who will step in and help with interviews, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a faculty member that you're interviewing with. And so the faculty member will, introduce themselves ahead of time, when you first enter the room and share a little information about themselves. They'll ask you to do the same. And then, you'll proceed, answer whatever questions they have for you. And at the end, depending on how much time is left, that's an opportunity for you to ask that individual any questions that you might have for them. Definitely pay attention when they're giving their intro to you. You can jot a note down about, what specialty area they're coming from or whatever they might share with you. Definitely, make notes on that because you might want to circle back around to that to ask them a question about their role at the college. And then your camera should be on at all times. Now, that is very important for us here at the Taneja College of Pharmacy. So I definitely encourage you to pay very close attention to each of the programs that you're interviewing with and what instructions they give you. For us, we want your camera to be on the entire time. We don't want any room for, the faculty member to feel that there was a lack of integrity on your part. So you shouldn't be turning the camera off when you are in there with that individual and you're doing your interview. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's see. Is it gonna go to the next slide? There we go. Okay, I think it's so. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the types of questions and different activities that there are with the interview day. Um, So, types of questions. Now, there are more of the traditional style interview questions, which I'll show you some examples after this, but those are going to be, a traditional type of question of, you know, where, what made you interested in pursuing pharmacy? Why do you want to go to pharmacy school? And then there's situational type questions, which historically at the Taneja College of Pharmacy, we have not had those situational type of questions, but there are other pharmacy schools that do ask you those situational type of questions, and they're more of how would you handle this type of situation. And sometimes that might be kind of like clinically based of like some type of scenario type of question, and we don't ask those style questions. We typically say, you're going to learn what pharmacy school is like and how you would answer those types of questions by going to pharmacy school. So there, for us, we're not asking you clinically type based questions or scenarios like that. They're questions that you would be able to answer. And then there are those behavioral types of questions as well, which we'll give some examples of those, but those are kind of, your experiences and how you've handled certain situations in the past. So again, things that you would be able to speak to. So let's look at some tips for responding, and then we'll dive into some examples of traditional questions and behavioral type questions, and then we'll do some practicing. So with that, tips for responding to questions. First of all, it's good to just kind of have a sense of the different types of interview questions. After this, we will send you in a follow-up email some examples of different types of questions. And so you can use those to practice, like I mentioned earlier, and try to do some mock interviews. So it's good to prepare, to feel prepared for an interview, to feel confident in, you know, seeing a question, being asked a question, and being able to come up with a response to that question. Naturally being able to do that. You don't need to memorize a script. You don't want to seem robotic in some way, but you do want to seem like you were prepared for the interview. You know, you were prepared to answer questions about yourself, and you've thought back about, you know, the type of student that you've been, any challenges you may have, and how you might answer those questions, or why you're interested in going into this field. Like, you've been able to think through that so that if you're asked a question, you can answer that question. You know, I do not think that our admissions committee is trying to, you know, toss any type of trick questions to you, and by any means. Uh, so make sure that you fully understand the question when you're asked the question, you know, because depending on where you're interviewing, they, you know, it might not be something that's written down for you. If it's more of a traditional type of interview, it might just be that they're asking you the question, and so you're not seeing it. Whereas when you're doing an MMI, oftentimes that question is being typed out, so you're seeing it written and you're hearing the question as well. So, and you're spending a little bit more time looking at it, and, you know, if the school is giving you time ahead of time to kind of think about the question. So when a question's being asked to you, it's okay to take a second, you know, process what was said, ask, you know, for clarification if you're not sure. You know, you want to make sure that you're understanding the question, so that when you're calculating in your head how you're going to come up with your response, you're coming up with a response to the correct question. So that's okay. Nobody's going to fault you for saying, okay, I want to make sure that I understand. So you're wanting me to go into detail about this, you know. So to do that, and then discuss the facts that are needed to answer the question. Okay, so you want to make sure you're getting directly to the point. You don't want to get long-winded with a response, and I do think that that sometimes takes practice for you to figure out how do you give an answer to a question, and make sure that you're not giving unnecessary information, and you're just getting to the point, and you're doing that in a quick way that's not getting off topic or just adding extra details that don't really need to be there. So we'll talk about some ways to do that here in a second. You also want to just make sure you are focusing on your successes as well. So again, when you are doing interviews, it's just like when you're doing a job interview. Everybody has to be prepared to answer the question about weaknesses. They usually are always asking you some type of question about that. And you have to be able to have reflected on that and how you are working towards improving your weaknesses, you know. So think about that, how there's strength in improving any weaknesses that you may have identified that you have. So keep that all in mind. So everything is a learning opportunity and allows you to be able to reflect. And that's one of the most important things with interviewing, is being able to look back and show them how you've reflected on any mistakes or anything like that, to show them that you were prepared and ready for what's ahead, with the challenges of being in a professional school, pharmacy school. Okay, let's see. All right. So, traditional style questions. Like I said earlier, tell me about yourself and why you're interested in pharmacy school. Please describe the type of pharmacy school experience that you're looking for. What do you consider your greatest strengths? What do you consider your greatest weaknesses? And how do you overcome them? So, those are traditional style questions. Those are some great questions to think about, reflect on, and potentially be prepared to answer. Behavioral type questions would be, so again, tell me about a mistake you've made. How did you handle it? Yeah, that's a little different. Give me an example of when you set a goal for yourself and you were able to meet or exceed that goal. Tell me about a conflict you have had recently and how did you resolve it? Share with me an experience you had working with people of different ethnicities, ages, genders, and physical abilities. So you notice how with all of these types of questions, it's going back to like a behavioral, like what actions, what were you doing in those situations? How did you handle those types of situations? Though that's the difference between the behavioral style questions that you could see. So with that, one of the best strategies and techniques for being prepared for behavioral questions is something that we call the STAR L method. And I'm not sure if I feel like if I try to click this link, I'm not sure if it's going to open on the screen. Give me 1 second. Let me see if it does. If it doesn't, I may just have you all. Well, I'm not sure what's happening. What we may do is just have you all to, let's see. Oh, okay. Is it popping up on your end? Oh dear, sorry. With Teams, it allows us to one person can start out presenting something. Oh no, okay. I think her computer is probably oh maybe it's trying to play the video. No, okay. Okay. I think I may have messed up Miss Zet's computer. So what we will do is I will just talk through this with you all. And just know that when we send you the PowerPoint, there's a hyperlink to the actual video. So you can watch the video on your own. It's like less than 2 minutes, just under 2 minutes, of an individual talking about the STAR L method and how they've used it and how they think that it's the best way to prepare for interview questions, like behavioral style questions. So with that, STAR L method, and you all may have already heard of the STAR L method, but with it, it's looking at the situation. So you're going to describe a specific situation and the details of that experience. Oh no, I'm sorry. You're going to look at the task. So what was the task or goal at hand? Action. What actions, again, remember I kept saying that, what actions did you specifically take to address the situation? Result. You want to be able to, get back to, okay, so what actually ended up happening? Describe what the outcome was as a result of your actions and make sure, okay, you can end with this, make sure that it's a positive outcome. Whatever example it is that, is floating around in your head when you're trying to come up with an example, at the end of the day, it needs to be a good example. So it needs to go back to something positive came out of this. Okay. And then learned. So what did you learn from the experience and what might you change in the future? So if you think with that mindset, that when you think about that, that allows you to make sure that you're providing a complete response to the question. And that's what you want to do is to really be able to answer a question in such a way that the interviewer says, okay, well, that answered it. That really answered the question. Now, they might ask you because they're interested in the situation at hand some additional questions because perhaps it was a certain topic that intrigued them. Maybe it was a cell biology class that you were having struggles with and you talked about that, and so that intrigued them, and so they had a specific question about something that you mentioned about that particular cell biology class. But for the most part, it should answer the question fully. And they might kind of dive deeper into that positive outcome or something like that. But you really want to feel like you fully answered the question and they're not having to say, well, could you better explain that? Could you tell me? I'm not quite getting, the result of this. So what actually happened? They shouldn't have to ask you, well, what actually happened in the end? You should have already answered that for them. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so with that, okay. So we want to take this opportunity for you to practice real quick. So I'm going to give you a minute, and you on your own just come up with an example right now. Tell me about a mistake you've made and how did you handle it? So think about that. How would you answer that question? Again, using the star L method. So it was situation, task, action, result, and learned. How would you answer that question? And you don't have to type anything in the chat or anything like that, but just think about it on your own. What would you, how would you answer that question applying that? And then I'll show you an example. We can talk through it. But just take another minute to think about that. Okay, so that's probably given you enough time. So, okay, I'm going to put an example up and I'm going to read through it with you all real quick. Okay, so the example that I have here is I was working as an intern for an events company. So I'm starting out with what the situation was. And I say, okay, I was responsible for ordering the floral arrangements for a private event hosted by a high profile client. So I'm telling what the task was at hand, what I was responsible for doing during that time. And I say, okay, unfortunately, I mixed up the information from another event and the flowers were delivered to the wrong venue on the other side of town. Okay. So I paint the picture of what was going on. Action. So what exactly did I do? So I admitted my mistake to my boss and took an early lunch break, drove to the other venue, picked up the flowers, and delivered them to the appropriate venue an hour before the event. Okay. So the result of all of this was the client never knew about my mix up and my boss was very grateful. Now, what did I learn from all of that? I am now sure to pay much closer attention to detail when working on projects. So you see how easily it is to apply that and to make sure that you're giving a full response to a question, but also you'll notice how there wasn't any extra details that were unnecessary. Like literally this just gets straight to the point. It talks about exactly what the situation was and what the task was at hand, what I did, the result, and then what I learned from it. It's not offering any unnecessary details about, well, how was the drive on the way? Like, oh, I saw the sign and I got distracted by the sign, and then there was a car accident that I saw. I just literally just got straight to the point, left out all the unnecessary details that were not needed. Just, it was to the point to be able to answer the question. So I definitely encourage you all to utilize this method. Again, we're going to share with you a list of traditional questions and a list of behavioral style questions. Go through those and start practicing. Okay, how would I answer this question? And how could I quickly practice that in my head, keeping that in mind so that I can just kind of run through it in my head to know that I'm answering the question completely. And I think once you think about questions in that way, you'll quickly just pick up on it and start to be able to answer a question in a way that allows you to fully answer the question. So keep all of that in mind. That covers all of the different types of interviews, styles of interviews in terms of oral questions. But then there's also, again, group activities. That is something that you could see at a school historically. At the Taneja College of Pharmacy, we have had a group activity, but we are moving away from group activity. So you will not participate in a group activity when you interview with us. Again, when you interview with us, if you're invited to interview with us, then you would just do the oral interview with the faculty member. That is what we consider your interview to be. So you're not assessed on a group activity. But we did want to keep this in here because there are other schools that participate in having students do a group activity. And part of this workshop is to just make sure that you're fully prepared for interviews as a whole as you're exploring pharmacy schools. So again, with that, if you are participating in a group activity, you do really want to be self-aware, you know? So if you have a tendency to overtalk people, you want to be mindful of that, you know. So if you have a tendency to go off on tangents and you like to chat a lot, you know, be mindful of the type of individual you are. Also be mindful of, the different roles of a team. Usually there's somebody who's a leader. Sometimes there's individuals that might stand back and not say as much, but think about how you normally are, you know. And as long as you're aware of how you are, that's okay. But you also want to, make sure if you're a leader, you're a good leader. You know, you're giving other individuals a chance to talk. You're seeking input from others. You're not just trying to go off of what you think and thinking that what you think is the best thing to think. You're also allowing others to offer input as well, because you can co-lead, so just kind of keep those things in mind. If you're normally a very reserved and quiet person, then you're gonna have to say something. You don't want to go through that whole group activity and you didn't offer any input. Your input is valued as well. So whatever it is, it's that group activity and participation is important. So make sure you're participating. You want to make sure that y'all are focusing on the task at hand. Y'all are not getting distracted, spending too much time, on any one thing, because they're probably going to give you a time limit with whatever this group activity is. Use your strengths. If you are a leader, encourage others to participate. If that's something that you naturally are able to do, make sure that you're doing that. Communicate with others throughout the activity. Just be respectful of everyone. If somebody else was about to say something and they haven't say anything, let them talk. Be respectful. Say, hey, yeah, please continue on. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Didn't want to and don't want to interrupt you. So just kind of keep that in mind with the group activity. And then you could be asked to participate in a writing activity as well. That is not something that we do at the Taneja College of Pharmacy. We haven't done that for years and years. When the school first started, they did have a writing activity, but they moved away from that. So that is not something that we've done, but we do want you to be prepared for that because there are some schools that do still have some type of writing activity. So with this, you want to make sure that you're thoroughly reading the instructions so that you are not missing anything that they asked you to do. Usually they'll give a period of time where, they're going over the instructions with you, or you're able to read through them. If there's a chance for you to ask questions, make sure you're understanding correctly what they're asking you to do. And you want to consider your response to whatever prompt they're giving you and its relevancy to the topic. Again, whatever they're asking you, are you fully answering the question and not giving any unnecessary, unsolicited information that is just not necessary. Because usually they would give you some type of word limit, character count limit as well. So you want to be concise. And then keep in mind again the time limit that they're giving you to complete this writing activity. That way you're not having to rush through anything and feel like you didn't really have a complete thought at the end. So just kind of pace yourself with that. And usually they'll give you some type of countdown warnings as well. And then just make sure, hopefully, that you have enough time to proofread whatever writing sample it is before you get to the end and actually hit submit on it. Now, the example we have here with the pencil and paper, I don't know that they would give you a pencil and paper to write something. I imagine it would likely be on a device, a laptop or something of that nature. But who knows? You may be asked to write with your handwriting. So, I'm not really sure because we don't do a writing activity, but just make sure, if they provide you with information ahead of time, just make sure that you ask questions and take advantage of looking at that information ahead of time so that you are prepared for whatever it is they might ask you to do in terms of the writing activity. All right, so final considerations. I'm going to click through this from, oh, well, Miss Zetz, are you able to, you can't even unmute yourself. I don't think I can unmute you. Okay, so now I think Miss Zetz is just, I don't think I can. I don't think I could, it won't let me unmute you. Did I click that or did you click that? I did. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna continue. I got her screen frozen somehow when I was trying to get that video to work, and we don't want her to somehow end the session since we're recording and everything and lose you all. So we'll continue forward. So when you're going through this entire process, you want to put your best foot forward. So, with that, you want to make sure that you are thoroughly reading any emails that are sent to you from the institution that is inviting you to interview. So, they're usually going to send you a lot of information. We invite a candidate to interview with us. If they were invited prior to this interview workshop, we sent them the link to the interview workshop. If they're invited after the interview workshop, we send them the recording to the workshop. So, because we want to make sure that they have as much information as possible, you want to go ahead and have looked through websites, online resources, ask admissions office any questions and things like that to have as much information as possible on those schools, and also being prepared to ask them questions like on the interview day. Have done your research on that school because, again, while that school is interviewing you, you are interviewing that school. So that is just as important. And you're the one that holds a lot of power. You're making a big decision on where you want to go. So if you get admitted to that school, you want to make sure that you've done your due diligence to know, is that the school that you want to put down a deposit with? Is that where you want to go? So keep that in mind. So again, doing your homework and reviewing your application, make sure you're staying up to date on any current issues or anything that's going on, especially with this, whether it's the school or your state or things like that, because you might have a question for financial aid, things like that. So just knowing anything that's going on. Perhaps the school is moving into a different location. That has been the case for us. Now we're in a brand new building in downtown. um, think about your past experiences, who you are as an individual, what you have to offer, because again, all of that can come up. You reviewed the interview questions, you're prepared to answer, those questions about who you are. Also think about the logistics of the interview day. you've reviewed ahead of time and you're prepared. You have looked at the routes on how to get to that particular institution. If you're interviewing there in person, you've gotten familiar with the format. If you're interviewing virtually, you are prepared. Day of the interview, you're arriving early, whether it's virtually or in person. That way you feel comfortable. You're able to get to the bathroom, and if you need to run to the restroom right beforehand, you don't feel like you're rushing because you're there early. So early is on time. And then just most importantly, you want to be yourself. You are who you are, and that is great. And so make sure that you get a full night's rest the night before. I know it can be overwhelming, but I've always been one of those individuals, and hopefully you can take some of this, is you prepare all you can prepare for an interview. And you have to reach a point where you've said, I've thought about everything I could possibly think about. I've prepared as much as I can prepare. And now I just got to take a deep breath and just let it go. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen because I have done my due diligence. And if I continue to drive myself crazy about it, that's what I'm going to do. Just drive myself insane. And that's going to work up my nerves. So at some point, you just have to just take a deep breath and say, this is going to be what it's going to be, and I'm just going to give it my all, and I feel good, and just say I am prepared and I'm going to do the best that I can possibly do, and just go in there and do that. And so just stop stressing. You have to stop stressing at some point so that you don't continue to have those nerves, and the nerves get in the way of you having a good interview. And I think you will find, when you interview places, and we have some of the amazing faculty, I'm biased, but I really do. They are pretty amazing. And usually when you come in and it's your first interview, they say, it's okay. I know you're nervous. I was once where you are. I get it. And so they know it might take you, a moment with answering the first question till you get into a good little groove with feeling confident, like, okay, this is good. This is going okay, So just know it'll be okay. And then, make sure that you dress to impress. Again, like Miss Set said earlier, how you're dressing, that helps with how you feel. And you can have some of your personality in what you wear too. We have one of our students here now. I can't remember. I think she's P3. She came in a burgundy suit, and I remembered that. And we've also had a male student came in a pinstripe suit, and I was like, hmm. And those are things that was just their personality. You don't see that often, somebody in like a certain color of a suit. It's usually, your basic, your blue, your black or your tan. And that always stood out to me. But that was, and I had a conversation with that individual about it later, and they're just like, yeah, I like this suit and I really wanted to wear it because it's just me. And I'm like, I appreciate that. So you can still have on something that's professional attire and have it, have a little bit of your flair or a little bit of your personality to it. It's okay to do that. um of course, we still have in here non-pandemic times about the firm handshake. So yes, of course, if you were interviewing in person, you can, give a good handshake and things like that. Of course, for us, you're interviewing virtually, so a nice big smile and wave. That's always good as well. And then of course your body language. You want to make sure that you're looking straight forward, you're looking like you're paying attention as you're engaging with the individuals that you are interviewing with, and maintaining some eye contact, and just being the best version of yourself. And then, following up with the email or handwritten thank you note is always appreciated. I do think that that is something, for us, our faculty always comment on that whenever they're getting those follow-up emails from candidates. And that's also just a kind of a best practice for as you go out into the working world, professional world, is following up with those individuals that you interview with and thanking them for their time. All right, so other things to consider real quick is the March 1st cooperative admissions guidelines. We always like to go over this with candidates so that they are fully aware of it. Many of the AACP schools participate in the cooperative admission guidelines. And so, what that means is before March 1st, candidates can hold multiple offers. So they can have multiple deposits. So, you're interviewing, you're getting decisions, and you haven't come to a complete decision. You're still trying to weigh your options. This basically allows you to weigh your options. So this is great for those candidates who they're really strong candidates. They're applying early. They're getting all, their applications in and they're interviewing, early. They're interviewing during the fall and early spring. So they're able to go ahead, have multiple deposits. That basically gives you more time to get to know those institutions that you're holding multiple deposits with so you can come to a decision about where you want to go ultimately. So with that, if a school is participating in those in the cooperative admission guidelines, then they can only require a max deposit of $200. So we participate. That's part of the reason why I'm going over this is we require the $200 deposit. It's a non-refundable deposit. So if you decide that you're coming here and you ultimately end up matriculating, it does get applied to your tuition or fees or something like that in some manner. It gets applied to your account. So you do end up seeing those funds in some fashion. We cannot require a second deposit prior to March 1st. So keep that in mind. So any school that's participating in the cooperative admission guidelines. So come March 1st, you have to have made a decision because by that time you can only hold one deposit. So say you're holding 3 deposits. You got into all 3 schools that you applied to and you got 3 deposits. Well, in most cases, students are really good about long before March 1st, they've made that decision. Usually early spring, they've gone ahead and made that decision. And so they will at that point go ahead and withdraw from the 2 that they're not planning on going to so that they're only holding that 1 deposit. So you have to reach out to those other programs and say, hey, look, you know, unfortunately, I will not be attending your institution. I just want to thank you for, you being polite. I want to thank you for the time and consideration that you all have given me. I really enjoyed getting to know you all, but I've made a decision to go elsewhere. So I want to make sure that my seat can be released to another deserving candidate, and they will appreciate you doing that. Make sure that you do that. That is important. The last thing you want to do is just lead a school on. Once you've made that decision, go ahead and tell that school that you're not going to their institution. You don't have to pick up the phone and call them. You could just send a professional email and then you don't have anything else to worry about. You've done that, check that off your list. You can go on to other things and focus on other things and not have that lingering. So make sure that you're doing that. It is respectful. And then from there, you can still receive offers from other schools. So at that point, so say, you still hadn't gotten your first decision yet. You hadn't even gotten an interview from your first decision yet. And you went ahead, okay, you had the 3 deposits, you dropped 2 of them and you're still holding 1 deposit because maybe that was your backup, your second choice. And then you get an interview from your first choice. You do that interview and you get into that school where they're going to give you a certain amount of time when you got to make a deposit with them. So at that point, this is your school. You're like, okay, yay, I got in. Well, then at that point, you're going to submit your deposit to that school because you're securing your seat, by that deadline that they're giving you to submit your deposit. And then that other school that you were holding the deposit with, you're going to immediately send them an email and say, okay, I have already, confirmed with, another school that I'll be going there. Again, the same spiel that you gave the other 2 schools. Unfortunately, I will not be attending your institution. Thank you so much for your time and consideration. I've really enjoyed getting to know you all, something of that manner. Okay. So thank them. That way they can release that seat. So that is what you are going to do. And then again, so if for some reason like that one school that you were originally holding the deposit with, say that was your number 1 school, if they require a second deposit, at that point after March 1st, they can require that second deposit to you. Okay, so they could, say their second deposit was another $200. They'll say, hey, okay, your second deposit is due now and you need to give it to me by March 1st or whatever they tell you. Then you have to comply with that in order to continue to hold your seat with them. And if a school does that, they will let you know what that is. For us, we only require the one non-refundable $200 deposit. So we won't come to you afterwards asking for another deposit. But that's just something to be aware of. And then contact information for FarmCast, just in case you have any questions as you're going through the application process with FarmCast. Because sometimes students will reach out to us and it might not be something that we can assist with. You might have to reach out directly to FarmCast if it's anything about your transcript verification or what transcripts might be missing. If you still haven't gotten verified yet, we're going to direct you to FarmCast. So just be aware of their hours and how to get in touch with them. And then, of course, this is our contact information for how to get in touch with us. All of you likely know how to get in touch with us at this point since, you've been hearing about our events and things like that. We will always be posting on social media. October is National Pharmacy Month, and so National Pharmacist Month. And so we will have a lot of fun stories and things like that planned for the month. So definitely check that out. It's a great way to continue to learn about pharmacy. And as we have updates within the college, we always have amazing things that are going on here. In a couple weeks, we'll have another white coat for our PY ones that just came in, the class of 2029. I can't believe it. We'll be seeing the class of you all would be the class of 2030, which is crazy to say. So, if you want to get a recap of what that white coat ceremony looks like, we'll be doing some highlights of students and have some good footage of that. So definitely, pay attention to all of our different social media accounts for that. And then I know AACP and FarmCast both, Pharmacy for Me, all of those different platforms will be doing lots of posting throughout the month of October. So definitely check those out. They are great resources as well if you haven't checked those out already. And then I think that is everything as far as the PowerPoint slides go. So I am going to stop the presentation. I don't know what that'll do to your screen, Miss Vets, but it's now black.
I got my cursor back. Yay!
Okay. Oh. Well, everyone, we do want to see if you all
Oh,
have any questions for us. And Miss Zets, if there was anything that you were going to say that I may have left out, feel free to say that.
I think you covered it all. You did.
But yes, you all can type questions in the chat. If there was anything that you all wanted to ask, feel free to do that. We definitely want to give a chance for you all to ask any questions that you may have so that we can answer those. Or if you have to use the Q&A, you can do that as well. We'll keep an eye to see if anything pops up there for the Q&A. I feel like there was one other thing I was going to mention when I look back at these slides that's escaping me. Mm, maybe not. Um, no, not coming to me. I feel like I had a thought when I was presenting, but it has escaped me at this point. No questions? You don't have any questions? Mhm. As a pharmacy tech, would you like majority answers to be direct experience or a mixture of Personal and work experiences. That's a good question. So we are seeing more applicants have pharmacy technician experience. That's a great thing to have. If you have that certification and experience, I definitely always encourage candidates, when they're giving their intro, if you happen to be a pharmacy technician, mention that. But I wouldn't say all of your responses to answers would have to be centered around that. If it makes sense to share something related to a work experience or something that's centered around that, then sure, bring it up. In terms of that, I've seen that happen before with candidates with interviewing, but there are plenty of other situations where, the question that's being asked, it might make sense to speak to something that's more of academic or of a personal. So I think it really just kind of depends on the question at hand that they're asking you. But if you have an opportunity, it makes sense to give an example related to that experience. Definitely, by all means, but definitely make sure that you just share that up front when you're giving your intro, because I think that it does, share offer insight into why you're interested in the field and kind of what you've done to demonstrate that you've explored the field a little more to show that you're committed and really interested in being a pharmacist. And of course, if they ask you why you want to be a pharmacist, that's a great segue into talking about that pharmacy technician experience and experience you've had, working with pharmacy managers and things like that as well. Mm. Ways that we've seen a candidate make a mistake in an interview and come back from it. So, to that, I would say not fully answering a question and then having to be asked follow up questions. So, if they're asking you follow up questions, just again, making sure, they're asking you those questions for a reason because there was something that you might not have said to fully answer the question. So at that point, going into more detail. I would say that's the big mistake is just, you were asked a follow-up question and you still give a two-word response to the question. You still don't give any additional insight. They're almost treating it as though you don't even want to be at the interview. It's like, okay, well then why did you apply to the school? You have to offer some more insight, give some more detail, one quick sentence might not be enough to answer the question. So if they're asking you more, take a second to think back. What do I really have to say? What are they trying to ask me with this question to make sure that I'm really answering that question? So I think that can be something that it could be a simple mistake that a student could make and then could definitely come back from it by just simply, answering the question when they ask the follow-up question. But there are situations where a candidate, might still the interviewer is probing them and ask a few more like probing questions to get them to provide a full response, and they still just don't offer it up. And so that's the thing that immediately comes to mind when I think of that question. Any other questions that y'all have? No, question related to the application, but not to the interview process. So yeah, we still have more time. So if y'all have other questions, we definitely will take other questions that you might have. That way we can answer those. It might be a question that others might have as well. The other thing that I would say real quick is that, and I'm not sure, Eve, if you attended the application workshop, but we do have the application workshop. That was it just last week? Was that?
It's been a few. The
Oh,
application work, it was over the summer.
it
It
was
was in
over the
July.
what was last week? Something was
Information session.
information session. Okay, like there's so many things. Um,
Yeah.
We did host an application workshop in July, which that is live on the website. I'll try to find the link to that real quick, actually, and drop it in the chat for y'all so that y'all can just quickly go ahead and click on it to have access to that. But yeah, I definitely recommend
I can grab
looking
it.
at. Okay, I almost have it up, I
Oh, okay.
think. Yep, I clicked real quick. So let me just type that in there. Application. Oh no, it started playing. I was like, why am I hearing my voice? Okay, so I dropped that in the chat, and then we will have our information recording as well. We could send that in the follow up for this, also the link to that. So if y'all would like to check that out, but that'll probably likely answer any questions that you may have had about the application. So I definitely encourage checking that out, that application workshop. Because we pull up the actual application and everything. So, um, so timeline, definitely check out that video that I just put. But the the what am I trying to say? Priority deadline. That's what I was trying to get out. Priority deadline is October 1st. So we definitely encourage candidates to get their applications in by October 1st. For those candidates who are really strong candidates, that is the way to be considered for our scholarships, our acceptance scholarships, and most competitive acceptance scholarships is applying by that October the 1st deadline. As far as timeline goes for a possible interview, it really all depends. For candidates who are really, really strong candidates, they could be offered an interview, rather quickly. And then there might be candidates who might not be as academically or strong of candidates, and they may not be offered an interview anytime soon. So it could be that their file is reviewed and looked at, and, you know, they still just haven't received any type of decision from us. So the way I like to say it is, great if you apply and you hear back and you get an interview, you've heard something. If there's something missing from your file, like we need you to submit, a plan for how you're going to complete the rest of the prereqs, or, say there was a letter of recommendation missing, we'll reach out to you if there's something we need from you. But otherwise, if you hear nothing, haven't heard anything, then that's not bad news. I mean, so that means your file is still under consideration. It's still being reviewed. So you might not hear back you'll hear something in the beginning acknowledging that we reviewed your file. If you make it to a point where we've reviewed your prerequisites, we'll send you an email regarding that. So you will hear something from us. But it could be that your file just goes in and you're not receiving some type of update from us. So don't necessarily expect an update after you've received the initial emails from us. You're welcome to reach out, but we might not be able to tell you anything outside of the fact that your file is just still under consideration, under review. But typically, if a file is like I said, a very strong file, then that candidate might be hear back from us a little bit sooner, because our plan, our goal is always to make sure that we're recruiting the best students to come to our program that are going to be able to be successful. I always tell candidates that the admissions number one charge is to look for success in candidates. They want candidates that are going to be successful, that are going to do well in their coursework, and who are going to pass their boards. So that is what they're going to be looking for when they're reviewing files. So timeline, it could really depend. It just depends. So I can't really necessarily tell you a specific timeline as far as if you get offered an interview, what that timeline might look like. But I would say, we tell candidates, 4 to 6 weeks for verification status from PharmCast, as far as when you submit your PharmCast application and you're waiting on your transcripts to be verified. Now, typically, PharmCast is very quick about getting applications verified, but things start to really ramp up in September, October. That's when the large number of applications are coming through. Most candidates are getting their applications submitted then. So, um, and sometimes it'll only take them a couple of weeks to verify application. Other times it might take the 4 to 6 weeks. So we just say that on average to err on the side of caution. Oh, okay. Yes, that's good to know. Okay. Oh, and then as far as when they might hear back from completing the interview, usually it's within about a month they would hear back from us. Most of the times they hear back a lot sooner than that, but that is something that the admissions committee is in the process of discussing is timeline for the cycle as far as like how soon a candidate would hear back after interviewing with us. But like I said, in the past, it has usually been, rather quickly, but I would say about within a month time, they usually hear back on that. Questions. I definitely wish you all the best as you prepare for this interview season. I hope you get interviews and everything, get your applications in and stay on task with everything in a timely manner. If you think of other things, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We will have more sessions. We'll have, I think we have a couple more information sessions coming up this fall. So those are opportunities to connect with us and hear information. And then, of course, you have the recordings, and we will send you this recording. And for those of you who happen to be at institutions in Florida, we'll likely be making our way around. I know we'll visit with the different student orgs here at USF. So we'll be doing that and then be reaching out to some of the other larger institutions as well across the state. So if we don't see you here at USF, hopefully we'll see you somewhere around the state at some point as we're out sharing information at the different institutions. But otherwise, it has been a pleasure having you all here. Definitely thank you all so much for staying with us and tuning in to this session. We hope that you found it to be informative and will be useful. Like I said, we'll send you a follow-up email with lots of resources after this. So just be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Good luck, everybody. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great night.